dialogue scene?
One.
Simple answer. Yeah. Chris Nolan very much likes to shoot single camera. This is great having these examples up here. This entire action sequence would have been single camera. There might be an occasion if you're risking a stuntman, or if you're doing something that you get one take at, then we put multiple cameras on it. Otherwise, Chris always wants to shoot this with a single camera. That's very unusual. You know, most directors always put a second one on it. This entire scene was shot handheld with me running around on a rickshaw or on the back of a motorcycle, or, you know, with a complete documentary spirit. No lighting, just shooting everything the right time of day with a camera. The next scene, I believe, when he's inside the car, Chris Nolan actually wasn't even there for it. Nor could we shot it in this real car, this stuff here. And Ken wasn't on the side for Leo, and Leo was on the side of Ken. So it was literally just me and the actor. And I had to focus myself and the actor, just because of the physical space. We wanted to shoot it in the real car. We wanted to shoot it under real conditions. So I don't know how I drifted back into the movie from that, but yeah. Really, in the end, it ended up being my first Academy Award nomination, and the look of the picture. To me, really, going back, it feels a little more commercial than I would have wanted to, so I feel that little bit of caution on my part. By the time I went to the next picture, everything was out the window. We did The Prestige next, and Chris was like, it's a period piece. We have complete control of this picture. And he wanted to shoot the whole movie handheld. So I really felt liberated going into that picture. I didn't feel any studio pressure whatsoever. We'd just done, you know, a sizable blockbuster film, done very well. This was a fraction of that budget. It was about the story. I was excited to do a period piece. I was excited to do my homework and try to come up with a look that I felt worked for it. And so a lot of that pressure is off. By the time we came out to do Dark Knight, I felt really no pressure, very well established at that point. And so always when everything seems like it's nice and comfortable is when Chris throws a curveball at you. And that's when he proposed the idea of shooting IMAX on Dark Knight. So that's when we had to try to crack the technical aspects of shooting in a format that had been reserved for documentaries up until that point on a major studio feature film. So that required a lot more work and nail biting on my behalf. So each time you have these little levels of out there, we may think we put ourselves as cinematographers in a vulnerable place because we're taking, you know, risks in what we think is lighting. But the reality is our risks might lessen the credibility of the look of the picture if we fail. But for an actor, if something in their performance loses an audience, for instance, Ellen Page there was reacting to nothing when she's standing up there. If her head isn't in the right place, or if Leo's head isn't in the right place for an emotional moment like this, then he's lost the audience and the credibility is gone. So how that comes back to how I deal with actors is it's really, really important for us. And I know Ron well enough to know that I can say I've never been on a set that Ron's shot on, but I know the actors love him. It's very important for us as cinematographers on a set for our presence to be comforting to an actor, not to have the actor worried or concerned about how they look, not to make more on the set of what we're doing than what they're doing. We've got to be invisible to a degree. We've got to help the director create that safety net and that comfort zone so an actor can come out when they're doing something very, very emotional and not be thinking about something else, not be distracted by something else, or not being concerned about something else. So if an actor walks on the set and he's completely prepared and ready to do a scene that requires a lot of emotion, and most scenes do. I mean, almost everything we're seeing, there's something in that performance that this person has to think about and create to translate that script. And if we're out there with our light meters going, yeah, give me another, I'll take another 18K through that window, then that's a huge distraction to the actors, to the process. We're doing a disservice to the director. We're shaking up that whole set. We're making it about us. As cinematographers, we have to be the invisible, unsung heroes of the stage, and we've got to make the actors feel comfortable, and we've got to facilitate the director's needs.
And actually, many.
it's kind of interesting. You're saying that one of the things that you're known for, and you really spent a lot of time developing, is your fast style on the set, and you want to keep things moving. And yet you think you're working on pictures that have an infinite amount of money to spend.
Yeah.
I mean, who's gonna cross Chris Nolan, and he can take as much time as he wants?
Yeah, who's going to cross Chris Nolan is Chris Nolan. He's a very, very efficient, frugal filmmaker. He's also the producer of the film, as well as being the writer and director. He's also the producer of the film, and knows, really, as a responsible filmmaker should, he knows that if we spend too much time on a simple day exterior scene like this, and we fall behind schedule, that he may lose time on something where he really needs a little bit of extra time later on. So he knows that it's all pie, and how you slice up that pie and how you distribute that money is a big difference. So we are very, very frugal in the way we make these films, which really, they're very, very expensive films. If you're spending $300 million in production on a film, I'm sure Chris wants it to look like anybody else's $400 million movie. And there's certain areas where he spends. He likes to travel to different locations. We shot Inception in 7 different countries because he wanted that. Part of the scope of the film to him was to have these different countries. This, of course, is Paris. Well, that's somebody's interpretation of Paris. Just quickly, I'm going to talk about the visual effect here for a second, because they're extraordinary visual effects. The company, Double Negative in London, had 8 months to do this particular scene. But every bit of that was composited from still photographs and actual filmed material. They're against a green screen for this, a green screen that turns. And once again, it's kind of like the Kubrick thing. It's very similar to the scene in 2001, when the hostess, the air hostess, gets onto the airplane and walks up the side wall. So you see some of these. And it's interesting to note the visual effects work that they've done there, because most of that is based on real images that they enhance. Still photographs taken at all angles of that same Paris area, film, and even some digital elements, and then some
we have questions available from all the panelists afterwards. We'll take one more question for Wally right now.
Okay, I was just wondering, in general, just as a, how long does it take you to plan your shots and whatnot? Because you were mentioning earlier how there's actually a nice independent spirit to a lot of the films that you make. And I think that's great because to know that, considering how successful they are in the industry, would you say that you still sort of struggle or work hard towards perfecting a shot, or have you developed a style that you just sort of stick to, or do you take time to experiment around with angles and what have you? What would you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all of the above. I think it really begins with your interpretation of the script, and it all begins with the script. The old saying, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. So really, I mean, I'll take it from that part of the process to get to the true answer to your question. But for me, the first read of the script is all about story, and is all about getting myself into what the director and the writer are saying in this, and getting an idea as to what the narrative is and what it's about. Then the second pass is kind of getting ideas for how we might film it, then going to the director with these ideas and starting to lay that out. As you go through that process, you start to break it down into smaller components. And in that, you start to consider all the situations and study the possibilities. When this scene was written, it wasn't written to take place on the rooftop, in Paris. I don't think it was anyway. But it's just conceived as a storytelling tool, and then it starts to evolve. The production designer and the director find a location they like. Then I start to look at what my issues and problems are. Believe it or not, this particular scene had the possibility of being very difficult for me. Because once again, if we shot that too late, we were on a Paris rooftop, I couldn't put up an overhead silk, which is what we usually do, because it's too windy up there. And I knew that problem was coming. I foresaw that problem. I was standing on a rooftop in a scout. I was like, oh, there's no way we're gonna be able to put a 20 by silk on top of this roof. So you start to think ahead. That's when you try to shoot it early enough so that you don't run into those problems. I think that each individual shot within each scene has those sets of problems. So if you're doing your homework in pre-production, you're starting to anticipate what you're going to run into. In pre-production, we didn't have this location, for instance, but once again, this is a situation where the daylight is constantly changing. So I really wanted to, and I work hard with the director and the AD to shoot the master of the shot, the wide shot, at a very particular time. Anything else, the coverage that you're seeing right now, is fine. I can relight it. And while I would shoot the master with no lights, the light that's on the people behind him is an 18K that we put into place after shooting the wide shot on the master. So once you get out of the hole, for instance, and you get that master done in a light that you want to shoot it in, then you can kind of recreate anything in a smaller scale. So I knew that 6 months before we did this scene. By the time they had chosen a location for that, by the time we started working out, I started going on light studies to that location. We were filming in London at the time. This is in Paris. I started taking the train to Paris. I sent my gaffer to Paris. We took photographs. We started mapping where the sun was going to be so that I could go to the director and say, pretty please, can we shoot this sometime between 8 and 11 a.m. so I can avoid the frontal light on them. So you're doing your homework, and you're putting something together here. And getting all these things to move that slowly was really, really hard. I think we... No, I'm just kidding. All a visual effect, obviously. Once again, another interesting note, we shot this all with film cameras, the slow motion elements. These are still a great example. Some of these are practical elements. The stuff flying clear. We shot real mortars in the air and filmed it at 500 frames per second. And then the visual effects guys just duplicated some of those and added their own in based on the lighting that were on the practical.
Shot no matter how many times you shot it, you just couldn't get it right, you had to settle or something.
No, it's a good question. Well, I guess you heard it because he's on a microphone. I was going to repeat the question. But yeah, look, I don't know if I would say there's a single shot that I always wanted to get and couldn't get. But you always compromise. You have to accept certain things, and it's very important as a director to do that too. If you have this grandiose idea in your head, exactly what something's going to look like, which is why I really am cautious with how much you rely on a storyboard or a shot list. You could storyboard something, you can do a pre-visualization of it, you can have this incredible idea, and the director might have an incredible idea of exactly how that's going to look on the screen, and then you show up to that location, and that particular day it's overcast, and the guy with the big truck that's supposed to be blocking that deeper background didn't show up, and one of the actors is 2 hours in the trailer, so that by the time you're ready to shoot, the light looks nothing like what you planned and look at. So you then shift directions. I mean, one of the ways that I've always done my pre-production, being a New Yorker, is I have an inherent negative philosophy towards things. So one of the ways I've always done my pre-production is looking at the worst case scenario. How that fits for me, and Nolan does the same thing, is basically if you're going to assume that day that you show up that it's going to be overcast, you assume that day that when you show up that truck driver's not going to make it, you assume that the actor's going to be 2 hours late and you're going to be shooting later than you wanted to be shooting. There's a key scene in this film that's an example of that, which is a massive, massive mechanical effects shot. There's a locomotive that drives down Spring Street in downtown Los Angeles. Well, it was a very tricky street for light. We were shooting in the summertime. So after a certain hour, the sunlight just pounded right down on top of the street. So I really was adamant I wanted to shoot this before 9 o'clock in the morning. So I begged the producers and the effects guys to have a super early call. So they had a pre-dawn call, and they all agreed to it. They got there at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Like, it's fantastic. They're going to be able to have it set up. We'll be ready to shoot by 7:30. Have a couple of problems. We'll still be shooting by 8:30. There's no reason why it shouldn't be done Well, lo and behold, we didn't shoot until 9:45 that morning. When you're dealing with such a huge effect, you can't rush anybody. Even I took longer than I thought I would because we ended up lining up 7 cameras for the shot because it was such a, we were smashing 10 cars with a locomotive. So everything took longer, and I was just furious that we didn't meet this thing. But you don't see it in the film. It's a